They called it the Silent Century. For 100 years, humanity went quiet. Total cosmic stillness. We retreated behind veils of darkness and electromagnetic ghosts, and the galaxy started whispering stories about Earth. They said the blue marble, that once burned so bright with ambition, was now just a myth, a shadow. Some said we'd destroyed ourselves in a great civil war. Others believed we'd uploaded our minds, abandoning flesh for something beyond comprehension. But the truth was buried deep, a deliberate, calculated deception. Captain Darius Kane stood on the observation deck of the Crimson Executor, the flagship of the Varantian Dominion's third assault wave. His amber eyes reflected the cold light of distant stars as he watched his fleet of 400 warships drift through the void, like predators circling wounded prey. Beside him, Lieutenant Tamsin Vale, his brilliant second-in-command, reviewed tactical displays. "Sir, we're approaching the heliopause of the Sol system," she reported, her voice steady. "All battle groups report ready. High Command expects complete subjugation within 72 hours. Darius allowed a thin, confident smile. The Varantian Dominion had steamrolled 17 star systems in the last decade. Earth would be just another trophy. Emperor Vectrus himself had called this mission a formality, a simple cleanup operation. "Any response from the inner planets?" Darius asked, already knowing the answer. "Negative, sir. Just like the scouting reports. No active broadcasts, no defense satellites, no patrol craft. The system appears completely dormant." Tamsin paused. "Sir, I should mention, 3 previous reconnaissance drones never returned telemetry after crossing the asteroid belt." Darius waved it away. "Equipment failure. Probably automated debris fields left behind before they collapsed." He turned to the bridge crew, his voice booming with absolute confidence. "All ships, advance to attack formation Delta 7. Target Mars orbit first, then proceed to Earth. Show these ghosts what happens when you hide from destiny." The fleet moved forward, a constellation of deadly intent. For the first 3 hours, silence. Neptune passed. Uranus hung undisturbed. Saturn's majesty offered no resistance, and Jupiter seemed to sleep through their intrusion. Then came the whisper. Not through comms, but through something deeper, something that touched the primitive fear in every mind aboard every ship. The temperature across the entire fleet dropped 5 degrees in seconds. Breath misted in the air. Consoles flickered with impossible mathematical sequences that hurt to even look at. "What's happening?" Darius demanded. Tamsin's face had gone pale. "Sir, we're detecting gravitational anomalies. They're not natural. Something is manipulating space-time around our vessels." "Source?" "I don't know, sir. It's like the void itself has become hostile." That's when the voices began. Thousands of them, layered and harmonized, speaking in every language the galaxy had ever known. They came through the neural implants every Varantian officer carried, speaking directly into their minds. "You were given a century to forget us. You were given peace, silence, and distance. Why did you come?" Darius gripped his command chair, fighting the vertigo of another presence inside his thoughts. "Identify yourself. This is Captain Darius Kane of the Varantian Dominion. You are in violation of our sovereign expansion rights." A sound like gentle, mechanical laughter echoed in his mind. Sovereign rights. How quaint. How temporary. The void around Mars' orbit began to shimmer. Space folded like paper, and from the creases emerged shapes that defied all known ship design. They were massive, each one dwarfing the largest Varantian dreadnought, built from a material that seemed to absorb light itself. Their surfaces crawled with moving patterns, as if they were alive. "Sir, scanning those vessels," Tamsin's voice cracked. "I'm getting impossible readings. They're power signatures. They're drawing energy directly from vacuum fluctuations. That technology shouldn't exist. It's too unstable. 12 ships. Just 12. arranged in a formation that felt both perfect and predatory. They didn't move. They simply existed, their presence alone causing sensors across the fleet to scream warnings about probability violations and causality disruptions. One of the ships, slightly larger than the others, projected a hologram. It was a human woman in a deep black uniform with silver accents that flowed like liquid mercury. Her eyes held the depth of someone who had seen civilizations rise and fall. "I am Guardian Protocol 7 of the Terran Defense Collective," she stated, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested she was speaking from multiple timelines at once. "You have entered protected space. You have violated the Treaty of Silent Watch. You have been warned." Darius forced steel into his voice. "Earth abandoned its seat at the Galactic Council. You have no treaty protections. Your civilization is considered defunct." The woman's expression didn't change, but the light around her hologram sharpened. "We didn't abandon anything. We evolved beyond the need for your councils and your wars. We gave you the gift of our absence. Now you've rejected that gift. Stand down or be destroyed," Darius commanded, signaling his weapons officers. "You are outnumbered 400 to 12. Guardian Protocol 7 tilted her head with the patient amusement a parent shows a child, threatening them with a toy. "Numbers, how adorable. Let me show you what humanity learned during our silent century." The 12 Terran ships didn't move. They didn't have to. The space between them and the Varantian fleet simply ceased to exist. One moment, 400 warships were in perfect attack formation. The next, reality stuttered, and those ships were scattered across 3 light seconds of space, separated by distances that would take minutes to cross at combat speed. Chaos erupted. Ships that were wing to wing were now alone in the dark, unable to support each other. The formation was shattered. "Impossible," Tamsin breathed. "They just manipulated our entire fleet's position without touching us." Darius watched his perfect fleet dissolve into confusion and felt a fear he hadn't known since he was a rookie. "All ships, reform on my position. Maintain weapons lock." But before any ship could move, the 12 Terran craft vanished. Not through FTL. They just weren't there anymore. They left behind only the fading echo of that multi-layered voice. "You have 24 hours to withdraw beyond the heliopause. After that, we stop being polite. Silence. The temperature returned to normal. The anomalies vanished. Everything was back to baseline, except for one critical fact. Every Varantian captain now understood with terrifying clarity that they had just provoked something far beyond their comprehension. Later, in his ready room, Darius stood before a star chart of the Sol system, his hands clasped behind him to hide their trembling. Tamsin entered, her face pale but determined. "Sir, I've analyzed the sensor data. Those ships. They operate on principles of physics our science doesn't even have theories for. Whatever humanity became during their isolation, it wasn't human anymore. Not entirely." Darius turned to her, seeing his own dread reflected in her eyes. "Contact High Command. Tell them we need reinforcements. Tell them Earth isn't dead. Tell them we just woke something up. What do we do until then, sir?" He looked back at the star chart, at the tiny blue dot representing Earth, and remembered the old wisdom of a dozen conquered worlds. "We wait, and we pray that whatever those humans evolved into still remembers what mercy means." The silence that followed was worse than any battle Captain Darius had ever fought. His fleet hung suspended in the outer reaches of the Sol system like insects caught in amber, unable to advance, yet unwilling to retreat without direct orders. Hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Every sensor officer watched their screens with the intensity of prey animals scanning for predators. Nothing appeared. No ships, no transmissions, no threats. Just the vast emptiness of space and the growing certainty that they were being observed. Lieutenant Tamsin Vale hadn't slept since the encounter. She'd spent 18 consecutive hours analyzing every fragment of data, running simulations, searching for patterns that might explain what they'd witnessed. Now she burst onto the bridge with the frantic energy of someone who discovered something terrible and could unknow it. "Captain, you need to see this immediately," she said, plugging her datapad into the main display. I cross-referenced our sensor logs with historical archives from before Earth went silent. I found something in the old Convergence War records, buried in classified files that most people don't even know exist. The display showed grainy footage from over a century ago. A massive alien fleet, easily 3,000 strong, bearing down on Earth's orbital defenses. The attacking force belonged to the Sarkellian Hive Collective, a species known for consuming entire planets to fuel their biological war machines. It already devoured 17 worlds and were considered unstoppable. This was Earth's last major conflict before the Silent Century. Tamsin explained. The Galactic Council refused to intervene because the Sarkellians had threatened to target any species that aided humanity. Earth stood alone. Darius watched as the footage showed Earth's conventional fleet engaging the Hive Armada. The humans fought with impressive coordination and courage, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Ships fell like stars burning out, their crews fighting to the last breath. The Sarkellian swarm pushed closer to Earth, their bioships pulsing with hunger. Then the footage distorted, not from damage to the recording equipment, but from something that made visual data itself unstable. 12 points of impossible darkness appeared across the battlefield, and from those points emerged shapes that hurt to perceive directly. They looked similar to the vessels they'd just encountered, but somehow more raw, less refined, as though humanity had been working with forces they didn't fully understand. What followed wasn't a battle. It was an erasure. The Sarkellian fleet simply stopped existing in sequential order, as though someone was deleting them from reality, one ship at a time. No explosions, no debris fields, just 3,000 vessels ceasing to be present in observable spacetime. The entire engagement lasted 4 minutes and 17 seconds. After this, Tamsin continued, her voice hollow, every single Sarkellian colony, outpost, and settlement across 7 star systems went silent within 48 hours. Their entire species just vanished. The official report called it a cascading biological failure. But there were rumors, whispers from intelligence operatives who claimed to have seen those 12 black ships appearing at each Sarkellian world moments before communication ceased. Darius felt his throat go dry. Total extinction. They committed genocide. That's when Earth withdrew from galactic affairs, Tamsin said. They sent one message to the Council. It said, "We have become what we needed to survive. For everyone's sake, let us disappear." And then they implemented the Silent Watch protocol and vanished. Before Darius could respond, alarms shrieked across the bridge. Not threat warnings, but communication alerts from every ship in the fleet simultaneously. A message was being delivered, forcing itself through their systems, regardless of firewall protocols or security measures. The view screen flickered, and a different figure appeared. A man this time, young in appearance, but with eyes that belonged to something ancient. He wore the same liquid silver uniform, but his bearing suggested someone who carried immense weight with practiced ease. Behind him, visible through a transparent wall, Earth hung in space like a jewel of blue and green, achingly beautiful and utterly serene. "I am Sentinel Operative Jorah Brennan," he said, and his voice carried undertones that made several bridge officers wince. "You were given 24 hours to withdraw. 18 hours remain. I'm contacting you now because our analysis suggests you still don't understand the severity of your situation." Darius stepped forward, trying to project authority he no longer felt. "We've sent our findings to High Command. Reinforcements are coming. Thousands of ships, perhaps tens of thousands. The full might of the Varantian Dominion. Whatever technology you possess, you cannot stand against those numbers. Jorah's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Pity, perhaps, or the kind of sadness someone feels watching a child refuse to learn from obvious danger. Captain Kane, do you know what we discovered during our silent century? We learned that the universe is far stranger and far more hostile than any of us imagined. We found things in the quantum foam between dimensions. We touched consciousnesses that exist outside conventional time. We became students of forces that make conventional physics look like cave paintings. He gestured, and the image behind him shifted. It showed not Earth, but something else. A place where geometry itself seemed negotiable, where light moved in impossible curves, where Darius could swear he saw structures that existed in more dimensions than his mind could process. This is the shadow lattice, Jorah explained. A framework of collapsed probability wells that exists beneath normal spacetime. During the Convergence War, we learned to access it out of desperation. We built our defense fleet to operate partially in that realm. That's how we defeated the Sarkellians. That's how we scattered your formation without touching you. We didn't move your ships through space. We moved the probability of where they could exist. Tamsin leaned closer to her console, fingers flying over controls. Sir, if what he's saying is true, they're not just technologically advanced. They've fundamentally altered their relationship with physical law itself. They're fighting from outside the normal causality chain. Jorah continued, his tone growing more urgent. But here's what you need to understand. Using that technology comes at a cost. Every time we manipulate the shadow lattice, we risk destabilizing it. During the war with the Sarkellians, we nearly tore a hole in reality itself. That's why we withdrew. Not because we were defeated or exhausted, but because we'd become too dangerous to ourselves and everyone else. He leaned forward, and for a moment, the ancient weight in his eyes became impossible to ignore. We spent 100 years learning control, building safety protocols, developing ways to defend ourselves without threatening the fabric of spacetime. We isolated ourselves to protect the galaxy from what we'd become. And now you've forced us to wake up those old weapons. And stand down, Darius said desperately. If using your technology is so dangerous, just let us leave. We'll report what we've seen. No more blood needs to be spilled. It's too late for that? Jorah's image flickered, momentarily replaced by something else. A vast network of ships spreading across the galaxy like a web of darkness. Your Emperor Vectress received our warning 6 hours ago. He chose to interpret it as a bluff. He's already dispatched the Grand Armada. 70,000 vessels, representing the combined military might of 16 conquered species. They're en route to Sol System with orders to reduce Earth to molten slag. The bridge fell absolutely silent. 70,000 ships. It was a force large enough to sterilize entire star clusters. An armada that had never been assembled even during the greatest wars in galactic history. Jorah's expression hardened into something that might have been resolve, mixed with profound regret. So now we have a choice to make. We can let that armada arrive and fight them using conventional means, which will result in mutual annihilation. Or we can demonstrate exactly why Earth chose isolation, why we begged the galaxy to leave us alone. What are you saying? Darius whispered. I'm saying that in 12 hours, if that armada doesn't turn back, we will deploy the recursion array. We will show your Emperor and every species watching what humanity kept locked away during the silent century. We will prove that some doors should never be opened. The transmission cut out, leaving only the ambient bridge noise and the sound of Darius's heartbeat thundering in his ears. Around him, officers stared at their stations with expressions ranging from shock to existential dread. Sir, orders? Tamsin asked quietly. Darius looked at the star chart, at the projected path of the Grand Armada, at the small blue dot representing Earth. He thought about his wife and daughter back on Vorinth Prime, about the billions of lives spread across the Dominion's territories. He thought about pride and conquest, and the terrible arithmetic of war. "Get me a secure channel to every captain in this fleet," he said finally. "No routing through high command, direct ship-to-ship only." When the channel opened, Darius took a breath that felt like it might be his last as the officer he'd been. "This is Captain Kane. I'm about to commit an act that will likely be called treason. I'm ordering a full fleet withdrawal beyond the heliopause immediately. Any captain who wishes to remain and face whatever's coming is welcome to do so. But I will not keep my crew here to die for imperial pride." Silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then, one by one, acknowledgments flooded in. Every single captain agreed. They'd all seen the same data, felt the same primal warning that some boundaries exist for good reason. As his fleet began its careful withdrawal, Darius watched Earth recede on his displays. Somewhere down there, or in orbit around it, humanity waited with weapons that could potentially tear holes in reality itself. And somewhere behind him, coming at maximum velocity, 70,000 ships raced toward a confrontation that might reshape the galaxy forever. "Captain," Tamsin said softly, "what do you think the recursion array is?" Darius shook his head. "I don't know. But I hope to whatever gods might listen that we never have to find out." He paused, then added almost to himself, "The Sarkellians numbered only 3,000. Vectrus is sending 70,000. Maybe he thinks that's enough. But numbers don't matter when your enemy fights from outside the rules of engagement entirely." Through his viewport, stars wheeled past as the Crimson Executor turned away from the Sol system. Behind them, Earth waited in silence. And beneath that silence, Darius could almost feel something vast and terrible stirring from its century-long sleep, preparing to remind the galaxy why fear and respect are sometimes the same thing. The Grand Armada arrived like a storm made of steel and fire. 70,000 warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Their combined mass created gravitational ripples that distorted sensor readings across 3 light hours. At the very center of this impossible force, aboard the flagship Eternal Dominion, Emperor Vectrus himself stood in full ceremonial armor, determined to personally witness humanity's final submission. He was old now, nearly 200 years by his species count, but his mind remained sharp, his will unbroken. Vectrus had conquered more worlds than any emperor before him. He had watched civilizations kneel or burn according to his judgment. Earth, he believed, would be no different. The warnings he'd received meant nothing. The mysterious technology they supposedly possessed impressed him not at all. History, after all, belonged to those bold enough to seize it. "All battle groups report ready, Your Majesty," announced Fleet Marshal Torvin, a decorated veteran whose tactical brilliance had secured 17 major victories for the Dominion. "Shall we proceed with planetary bombardment protocols?" Vectrus studied the holographic display. Earth floated serene and blue in the darkness. "Such a small thing to cause such concern. No," he said after a moment. "I want to speak with them first. Let them see the futility of resistance. Let them understand that their century of hiding ends today." He opened a broad-spectrum transmission, ensuring every receiver in the Sol system would pick up his words. "People of Earth, this is Emperor Vectrus of the Varantian Dominion. You stand before the greatest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Your tricks with gravity and your phantom ships do not frighten me. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally, or I will reduce your world to ash and memory." The response came not through communication channels, but through something far more intimate and far more terrifying. Every single person aboard every ship in the Armada suddenly found themselves standing somewhere else. Not physically, their bodies remained at their posts, but their consciousness, their very sense of self, had been pulled into a shared space that existed outside of normal reality. They stood on a vast, featureless plain beneath a sky that showed not stars, but glowing mathematical equations written in light. Before them materialized not one human, but thousands. Men, women, and others whose forms shifted between states, as though they existed in multiple configurations simultaneously. At their center stood Sentinel Operative Jorah Brennan, but he was different now. His form flickered with potential energy, and behind him, barely visible, stretched something vast and utterly incomprehensible. "You were warned," Jorah said, and his voice carried the weight of genuine sorrow. "You were given every opportunity to turn back. We didn't want this. We spent 100 years learning to be gentle with power that could crack worlds. But you've given us no choice." Vectress felt pure rage building in his chest. "Release us from this illusion immediately, or I will give the order to fire on your planet." "This isn't an illusion," said a woman who stepped forward from the human crowd. Her name tag identified her as Dr. Sienna Cross, though the energy signature surrounding her suggested she was far more than any simple scientist. "This is a quantum negotiation space. We've brought your consciousness here to show you something. A choice we made long ago, and the choice you're forcing us to remake." The landscape shifted. In an instant, they were all aboard an ancient Earth warship, watching through its sensors as a different fleet descended, the Sarkellian Hive. Every Varantian present could feel the desperation of that past moment, the cold certainty of extinction, the grief of knowing their species would be consumed and forgotten. "We were losing," Jorah explained, his voice echoing the past. "Everything we'd built, every dream, every hope, about to be devoured by a species that saw us as nothing more than fuel. So we did something desperate. We opened a door into a place we call the Shadow Lattice and built weapons that could reach through it." The scene changed again. They watched as 12 prototype human ships emerged from nothing. They watched as reality bent and warped around them. And then they watched as the entire Sarkellian fleet simply ceased to exist. But the perspective shifted now, showing them something the historical footage had never captured. The weapons didn't just destroy the Hive ships. They reached into probability itself and collapsed every single timeline where the Sarkellians had ever existed. The species hadn't just died in that moment. They were retroactively removed from causality, erased so thoroughly that the universe itself forgot they'd ever been. "We committed an atrocity," Dr. Cross said quietly, and tears streamed down her face. "We were so terrified, so desperate to survive, that we broke fundamental laws. We became murderers on a scale that transcends conventional understanding. 3 billion Sarkellian lives, gone not just from the present, but from all possible futures." The weight of that truth crashed over every consciousness in the shared space. Vectress felt it in his bones, the sheer magnitude of what the humans had done. Not killed, but unmade. "After the war ended, we understood what we'd become," Jorah continued. "We'd turned ourselves into gods of deletion, wielders of weapons that shouldn't exist, so we made a choice. We would withdraw from the galaxy. We would seal ourselves away and spend centuries learning control, learning ethics, learning how to defend ourselves without committing that sin again." The scene shifted one last time. They saw Earth during the Silent Century. Humanity working with obsessive dedication, not building more weapons, but building limitations. Creating artificial intelligence guardians programmed to prevent the use of reality-altering technology except in the most dire circumstances. Developing conventional defense systems that could protect without threatening the fabric of space-time itself. "We became janitors of our own power," said an elderly man whose eyes held the depth of someone who'd witnessed too much. "We spent 100 years making sure we'd never again become the monsters that fear made us. We rebuilt ourselves from the inside out, questioned every assumption, and mourned every Sarkellian life we had stolen. We tried to become worthy of survival." Vectress felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. It wasn't fear, but something far more complex. Recognition, perhaps, of the terrible burden these humans carried. "Why show me this?" he demanded. "Why not simply use your weapons and be done with it?" "Because," Jorah said, stepping forward until he stood directly before the Emperor's consciousness. "We're hoping you'll understand. We don't want to use those weapons again. Every time we manipulate the shadow lattice, we risk creating cascading failures in spacetime. We could accidentally collapse quantum probability fields across light years. We could unmake not just your fleet, but potentially your entire species, your homeworld, every planet you've conquered. And we might not even mean to. The weapons are that unpredictable." Jorah gestured, and the space around them filled with images. Not of battles, but of children. Human children playing in parks on Earth. Varantian younglings learning mathematics on their homeworld. Young beings from dozens of species across the galaxy, all innocent, all deserving of a future. "Look at them," Dr. Cross urged. "Really look. Your grandchildren are down there on Vorinth Prime. 3 granddaughters, I believe, ages 7, 12, and 15. Beautiful girls with your eyes and their mother's smile. If we use the recursion array and something goes wrong, they might be caught in the probability collapse. Not killed, but erased from ever having existed. Can you imagine that? Not death, but never having been born at all?" Vectress felt his hands shaking. "You're threatening my family?" "No," Jorah said firmly. "We're begging you to protect them by turning back. We're showing you what's at stake. This isn't about conquest or pride anymore. This is about whether we all survive the next few hours intact." Fleet Marshal Torvin's consciousness, present with thousands of other commanders, spoke up hesitantly. "If your weapons are so terrible, why not simply destroy them? Why keep capabilities you fear so much?" "Because the universe is dangerous," answered an older woman whose uniform marked her as one of humanity's first shadow lattice researchers. "We've detected things out in the dark between galaxies. Presences that make the Sarkellians look like insects. Intelligences that view entire civilizations as we might view bacteria. We keep the weapons as a last resort,